Even if you casually follow college football, you likely know that the Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners are headed to the Southeastern Conference in 2025. This move has sent shockwaves through the college football world over the past 11 months. It's left the Big 12 Conference without a traditional college football blue blood. However, it's added 4 new teams to its stable: Houston, UCF, Brigham Young, and Cincinnati. New teams or not, the writing is on the wall that the Big 12 will soon wither away and die, and the remaining teams will be scattered to the remaining power conferences. The question is, who will go where? And what will the impending death of the Big 12 mean for college football and a new playoff format? On July 29, 2021, the Southeastern Conference voted unanimously to admit the University of Texas and Oklahoma University as their 15th and 16th members. This left the Big 12 scrambling for replacements, and although they were able to get some well-known brand names as UCF and Brigham Young, none of the 4 teams added to the conference come near the selling power of the Sooners and Longhorns. The question remains whether either school will pay the $80 million exit fee to leave the conference early. Both schools have the financial ability to, but after seeing the utter disaster that befell Nebraska after jumping ship to the Big Ten with little to no preparation, I believe that they'll wait until the 2025 season and join the conference on schedule. Both the Longhorns and Sooners have been making administrative moves to be ready to compete in the SEC. Texas, of course, hired Steve Sarkisian as their head coach, albeit before intending to join the conference. Nonetheless, Sarkisian, a former assistant under Nick Saban in Alabama, knows at least how to tailor an offense to put on the field. The defensive side of the ball, however, needs a little bit of work. How Texas will address that issue remains to be seen. Oklahoma's preparation has been a little more straightforward. Over the past 20 years, the Sooners have been offensive wizards, able to score points at will. The problem is, however, the Sooners' defense tends to give up a lot of points more often than not. Realizing the SEC is a defensive-minded league, Oklahoma hired Brent Venables, the former defensive coordinator at Clemson, as their head coach in December of 2021. Venables is an expert motivator, and he knows how to put a hard-hitting defense on the field. The question remains, though, if Venables can get the recruits he needs to build an SEC championship-caliber defense in Norman. Oklahoma's move to the SEC is not as surprising as people think. When I lived in Oklahoma in the late 2000s, many fans had been wanting the Sooners to join the SEC. Besides being a household name in football, the Sooners have fielded top-ranked softball, women's gymnastics, and men's and women's golf teams. Sports the SEC is also known and collectively strong in. Being a more conservative school in state, as well as a more traditionally southern one, Oklahoma culturally fits in surprisingly well with the conference. Texas, though, was a shock to me. I thought for sure that if Texas was going to jump ship, it would have been to the Pac-12. The University of Texas, and Austin in particular, has more in common with the Pac-12 than the SEC, and the birth of a Texas-Southern Cal rivalry, given the history of, arguably, the greatest college football game ever played, would have been a strong new tradition for both teams. But in the end, with the weakening of the Pac-12 over the past decade, and concerns about its long-term strategy for financial stability and growth, the SEC was the better choice. Personally, I thought Baylor was a cultural fit for the SEC, but Texas has a lot more name brand recognition and a lot more financial influence than Baylor. I will say there are 4 positive things that will come from Texas joining the SEC. First, we get the Texas A&M rivalry back. Although the Aggies don't want it, the vast majority of college football fans do. Second, we get the Texas-Arkansas rivalry back. Third, we get to keep the Red River rivalry between the Longhorns and the Sooners. And finally, the Battle of the Boot between Arkansas and LSU can move to Thanksgiving weekend, where I think it belongs. Of course, with the animosity between the SEC and the Big Ten, we will likely never see Oklahoma-Nebraska as a yearly rivalry ever again. That's another story for another video. So how does this affect the SEC? The only really glaring change to the conference, besides probably expanding to a 9-game conference schedule, is that Alabama and Auburn will move to the SEC East, thus greatly strengthening that division and tipping the balance of power in the conference. With Oklahoma and Texas in the West, only LSU is the remaining true powerhouse, so this sets up nicely for both teams to contend for a division title right off the bat. Also, the bargaining power of the SEC for future TV contracts will surely grow stronger. The new TV deal with ESPN the conference is expected to sign in 2024 will give each team a $68 million payout each year. So, an $80 million exit fee for the Horns and Sooners is a small price to pay. And with them in the SEC, future deals are sure to be even more lucrative. Of course, the issue of the Longhorn Network is there. I predict this utter failure of a network will wither away and die, assimilating itself into the SEC network not with a bang, but with a whimper. But what about the rest of the Big 12? Without its two remaining major blue bloods, the Big 12 doesn't have that marketing oomph it used to. Baylor, TCU, Kansas State, and Houston are big names, but nowhere near that of Texas or Oklahoma. This doesn't bode well for the survival of the conference, and I don't think the current trend of switching conferences is anywhere near finished. In fact, I think that Baylor and TCU will look to join the SEC by 2030. The Big Ten will add Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. We'll probably see Cincinnati and West Virginia going to the ACC. When West Virginia goes to the ACC, that'll herald in the return of the backyard ball with Pittsburgh. Personally, I'd like to see Cincinnati in the Big Ten, but there's no way in hell that Ohio State's going to allow that. Texas Tech, the lone leftover school, will look to join the Pac-12. Now for the rest of the new additions. If TCU goes to the Pac-12 instead of the SEC, then look for Houston to take its place. As for UCF and Brigham Young, they'll be right back where they started. There's no way the Pac-12 will take a religious school like BYU. Baylor tried to join the Pac-12 back in 2014 and got turned down. As for UCF, they only have themselves to blame. I could have seen them in the ACC a few years back, but they burned that bridge with their fake national championship stunt in 2017. Sorry about your luck, UCF. Finally, how will this affect the future of the college football playoff? With the number of power conferences reduced to 4, I see the possibility of an 8-team playoff. Whether it be only division champions or 2 top teams regardless of division will be a point of debate. But we get a more balanced playoff with all conference champions guaranteed a spot. Also, will the Power 4 simply eschew the rest of the smaller FBS conferences and make a super division of their own? Regardless, I believe 4 power conferences instead of 5 would make for a much better playoff format. Of course, this is all speculation, and nothing's ever set in stone until it actually happens in the sport. So we'll just have to wait and see how the next 8 to 10 years play out. What do you think? Leave your comments and hit the like and subscribe button, and tell your friends about this page and help it grow. See you next time on The Death Penalty.